The global economy has continued to experience a myriad of economic challenges caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and land-linked economies such as Zambia are also contending with external shocks. You're watching the 2021 Zanaco Economic Review and Outlook with me, Winston Mavor, and I'm joined by Dr. Patrick Chileshe, who is the head of economic research at Zanaco Bank, and he will be providing some perspective and insight into where we are economically and giving some forecast. Doc, how did the economy perform in the second quarter of 2021?
Thank you very much, Winston. The global economic activity in the second quarter of 2021 really reached its highest level in the last 15 years. We saw the PMI touch a high of 59.2, which was last achieved in the late 1990s. Actually, what caused this was the growing service sector, which was a key driver of global economic activity. We saw quite a lot of activity in this space. The manufacturing sector did expand, but at a relatively slower pace. So, as a result of this expansion in global global manufacturing as well as the services sector, we did see more firms hiring workers across the globe. We also saw an increase in consumer demand, and that helped to push economic activity even more. Now, what is really important for this year, Winston, is how do we expect the global economy to perform? Data is suggesting that this year the global economy is going to grow at its fastest rate in the last 30-40 years. We are looking at a 6% growth rate according to the IMF. The World Bank is projecting a 5.6% growth in 2021. What is it that they are looking to drive growth this year? First and foremost, we've seen growing numbers of people now up and running because a large population of advanced economies have been vaccinated, and that is helping to push consumer spending, and that is helping to return the economies to growth. Another issue that is really going to drive growth in 2021 and beyond is the rebound in commodity prices. What you are going to see is that global commodity prices have been rising markedly in 2021. We've seen copper reach its highest in more than 10 years, and that is helping to push the growth of major commodity exporting countries, which constitute mostly emerging market and developing market economies such as Zambia. So those two factors, Winston, are going to be the key drivers of global economic growth in the year 2021 and beyond.
Doc, Zambia, like many other countries in the emerging and developing world, faced economic challenges due to the COVID-19 and other macroeconomic imbalances. How did the Zambian economy perform in the second quarter of 2021?
Yes, first and foremost, the Zambian economy, like you've rightly mentioned, has really been under stress because of the COVID-19 pandemic and, of course, long-standing macroeconomic challenges that we've faced. So in the second quarter of 2021, what we did see is improvements in macroeconomic conditions. I should mention that, yes, of course, we are not where we are supposed to be, but conditions in the second quarter of 2021 was the best in the last 2 years. A good example you can look at is the Purchasing Managers Index was the highest in the last 2 years. And what were the key drivers of economic performance in the second quarter of 2021? The first thing was the booming commodity prices on the international market, which helped to push mining production and also external sector performance. We also saw a big improvement in terms of electricity production, whereby we saw ZESCO increase its production of electricity, and that did help to push productivities, especially in the mining sector, in the manufacturing sector, as well as small-scale artisans that we see across our roads in Kalingalinga, in Garden. Those who are welding, they had more productive hours, and that helped to push private sector activity. We also saw an improvement in agriculture production. Remember, in the second quarter of the year, the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Agriculture did announce that Zambia produced yet another bumper harvest, which was about 3.6 million metric tons of maize, and generally other crops were also increasing, and that helped to add on to the level of economic activity. However, we should also mention that the economy did face some headwinds in the second quarter. The third wave did come in, and it did disturb consumer spending, especially in the month of May and June. That really did hit the economy. We also had challenges with regards to a weak kwacha, which elevated the cost of production, because much of our manufacturing sector depends on the importation of products from inputs from South Africa and other neighboring countries, as well as far away, such as China. And these products are bought in the US dollar, and when you convert them into Zambian kwacha, they make production a little bit expensive. We also had challenges with regards to the COVID-19 pandemic itself, which also limited people movements. Other factors included tight fiscal space. We've seen quite a tight fiscal space in terms of government spending, or especially on new economic activities, and that limited the demand for goods and services, resulting in dragging the pace at which the economy was actually recovering.
How is Zambia's growth prospects looking like in 2021?
The prospects for the Zambian economy are positive in 2021. We are expecting a positive growth of about 1.6%. That's our forecast as Zanaco. Other forecasters such as the IMF, the World Bank, and the Bloomberg consensus are all expecting a positive growth. For example, the World Bank is expecting a growth of about 1.8% in 2021. The Bloomberg consensus are expecting a growth of about 1.7%, which all are largely in line with what Zanaco is expecting as growth for 2021. Now, what are the key factors that informed our decision to revise our growth for 2021 upwards? The first one is the booming commodity prices on the international market. Remember, Zambia is a major exporter of copper, and that booming commodity prices means more income for the Zambian economy, and that is going to have positive effects in terms of forward and backward linkages, and that is going to drive growth in 2021. We are also expecting to see an upbeat ICT sector. Remember, the COVID-19 has actually made the working world to change, and more organizations are setting up work from home arrangements, and these work from home arrangements are actually driving the growth for ICTs. Other sectors that we expect to contribute to positive growth in 2021 is the growth in the agriculture sector. We had very good rains in 2020-2021 season, and that resulted in a bumper harvest of about 3.6 million metric tons, which is going to have a positive effect on the economy. Other crops also did very well. Thirdly, we also expect the good performance of the energy sector because of improved electricity production, especially from hydro sources. If you look at a huge component of our electricity, over 90% is actually coming from hydro sources. And according to the information that is available, there is a suggestion that we have more water in our reservoirs now than we had at the same time last year. I would give an example. For example, in 2020, at the same time, we had about 41% Lake Kariba full. This time we have about 51.8% full, which is relatively offering more opportunities for hydro production. Finally, we are also expecting an IMF program in the third or fourth quarter. Talks have been positive, and that has given momentum to offshore investors. We actually did see quite a lot of offshore investors come into the local market in the month of May and June. For example, the bond auction in May was the highest subscribed auction in history, attracting mostly offshore investors. The Lusaka Stock Exchange has been inviting quite a lot of offshore investors into the Zambian market. The Lusaka Stock Index has actually risen from about 4,200. We are now starting at around 4,700, which is a positive, and the major players are offshore players. So all these factors are likely to have a positive impact on the Zambian economy. Even in that environment, we still have challenges, of course, that the Zambian economy continues to face in the wake of the third wave of the pandemic, and that is having a negative effect on consumer mobility, negatively impacting sales of businesses. We also have an issue of tight fiscal space. Tight fiscal space has meant that government's expenditure on new economic activities are limited, and that is having a dent on the demand for goods and services for the private sector, and may actually slow down the pace at which the economy is going to grow.
Doc, we will get later on to the Kwacha, but still on the impact on an economy. Escalating inflation remains to be one of the most challenging economic problem that Zambia has faced, not only in 2021, but 2020 inclusive. What was the inflation outturn in the second quarter of 2021, and what were the key drivers of that inflation?
Yeah, and for much, since the pandemic started, we've seen inflation continue escalating. And the second quarter of 2021 is no exception. We saw inflation touch a high of 24.6%, and largely because of rising prices of meat products. And usually people are now asking, why is it that prices are rising, especially for meat products? One thing that people should understand is that a major input into the production of meat, which is stock feed, is largely priced in the US dollar. So the weaker US dollar has had that impact on the cost of feed, and that is feeding into the prices of meat products on the market. And largely, we can actually attribute escalating inflation to the depreciation of the Zambian kwacha.
So how do we expect inflation to perform in 2021?
Yeah, from where we stand now, going towards the end of the year, we still very optimistic about inflation outturn towards the second half of the year. We still anticipate that we might see a slowdown in terms of inflation. Our projections indicate that inflation could close the year between 14 and somewhere 18% by the close of the year. And the key reasons why we are expecting inflation to slow down is, one, we are looking at the fact that the Zambian economy did experience a bumper harvest of crop harvest in 2020-2021 season, and the Zambian Consumer Price Index, the biggest basket, is actually foodstuffs. So our anticipation is that with an improvement in supply of foodstuffs, we could actually see prices reduce. And actually prices have already started reducing on largely consumer products. The Zambian National Farmers Union did carry out a survey, and that survey indicated that actually FRA at the moment are the only buyers in the market offering a lucrative price, meaning that the private sector largely is willing to buy that same maize at a lower price. Now, FRA has indicated that they are going to buy 1 million metric tons. There's 2.6 million metric tons left. So we could see that that component of output may actually be purchased at a relatively lower price.
Doc, 2020, obviously, we did experience, accelerated depreciation of the kwacha, but we have seen that the Zambian kwacha has recorded, some stability in March of 2021. How has the kwacha performed against major convertibles?
Yeah, the Zambian kwacha, like you have rightly mentioned, has been on the back foot for quite some time, since the mid of 2018. And the biggest depreciation did come in 2020. Of course, we saw the kwacha lose about 50%. However, 2021 and especially the second quarter of 2021 has been a relatively different story. We've seen the pace at which the kwacha has been depreciating largely reduced. Actually, in the month of June, the kwacha only lost about less than 1%, which is a positive, and it's actually indicating stability in the foreign exchange market. Now, what has been the source of this stability in the Zambian kwacha? One, we've seen the Bank of Zambia aggressively in the market, injecting foreign exchange liquidity, supplying foreign exchange to the market, especially the crude oil sector, the agriculture sector, as well as the major commodities sectors that we have. So you realize that the impact of the Bank of Zambia has been massive in trying to stabilize the Zambian kwacha. Other factors, especially in the last 1-2 months, we've actually started seeing offshore players back into the market. And I should actually mention that one very important thing that has happened at the moment has been the return of offshore investors to the Zambian market. And we've actually seen the level of demand in the market reduce for the foreign exchange. We've seen the interbank market, which is a market where commercial banks exchange currencies. Activity has improved, meaning that there is more supply in the market for foreign exchange, and that is helping to reverse some of the negative effects that the kwacha has been under. A good example is if you look at this week, the Zambian kwacha has actually started appreciating.
Doc, the kwacha has been trading at above 22 kwacha for the past months, but we have seen, a strong comeback, which is below 21 against the United States dollar. What is driving this trend?
Yeah, thank you very much. Our expectations have always been that the kwacha is going to start trending south. It is starting to appreciate, but really we didn't expect it to happen so fast. But our observations and looking at the data really has indicated that fundamentals have moved faster than everyone expected. Quite a number of factors. We have copper. Copper on the international market, Wenson, is now trading at above $9,000 a metric ton, which is a positive for a major commodity exporting country such as Zambia. Remember, copper contributes about 70–80% of Zambia's foreign exchange earnings, and that goes towards meeting our import needs. Another factor that has been one of the biggest factors, in my view, is actually the change in sentiments. Because Wenson, people are going to tell you, we've been having the copper price increasing for a while now. Since last year, May, copper prices have been increasing. But why didn't we see the kwacha all of a sudden, the kwacha appreciating? What people need to know is that in the short term, the key dynamics of a foreign exchange is actually driven by the capital account and not the current account. So what is happening at the moment is that sentiments about the country's credit risk or sovereign risk has actually changed significantly because of factors pointing to the fact that we are likely to have, one, the IMF, who is a big brother, endorsing the Zambian economy. We've been told talks are at an advanced stage between Zambia and the and the IMF, and just a few nitty-gritties are there to be sorted out, and we could have an IMF program probably in the later in the third or fourth quarter. The second factor, Wenson, is that we are expectant that the country is going to receive special drawing rights. Like I mentioned earlier, the estimations is that Zambia is going to receive in between 1 billion to 1.3 billion. And what that is going to do, Wenson, is that Zambia's foreign exchange reserves are going to increase from about 1.1 billion, which we currently have, to about 2.3 billion dollars, which is about 7 months of import cover, well above the SADC requirement of about 6. So what now is happening is that investors have a positive vibe about the Zambian economy going forward. And as a result, we've seen quite a lot of offshore players coming back into the Zambian market. We have a lot of trading going on in the secondary market on Zambian securities, bonds, and as well as stocks, which are mostly being bought by offshore players. We have a lot of investors who are also buying Zambian securities on the primary market. The last 3 auctions, we've seen strong inflows of foreign investors into the local market. And one thing that we saw, for example, in the latest auction, over half of that auction was actually bought off by offshore players. Now, what is making these offshore players come back? They are coming back because there is an expectation that going forward, as macroeconomic conditions improve, interest rates are going to come down, and that is going to lead to an increase in the price of Zambian securities. If you are holding, for example, a government bond, and you are a foreigner, you have 2 things. You are winning. You have 2 things that you are going to win. One, the Zambian kwacha is going to appreciate, and at the time you be selling your bonds, you are going to raise more money for yourself. Then the second thing is that you are also going to have a situation where the currency is going to appreciate. So the money you came with when the kwacha was weak is going to translate into more dollars for you. So that's a plus for investors. So we've seen all these investors coming into the market. At the same time, because of increased supply in foreign exchange on the market and also positive sentiments, we've seen the level of demand kind of slow down. So because there is less demand in the market, whereas supply is high, it's simple economics. Excess supply should force prices downwards. And that is the more reason we are seeing the dollar actually depreciating against the Zambian kwacha, or the Zambian kwacha is gaining against the US dollar.
Doc, a lot of Zambians obviously are eager to be able to, experience the benefits of the kwacha gains at the moment. And we just want to find out, when will this happen? Is it something that is likely to happen now, or something that will be happening gradually?
First and foremost, there is an improvement in foreign exchange reserves that are held by the Bank of Zambia. Like I mentioned earlier, with the special drawing rights coming in, Zambia's foreign exchange reserves now stands at 2.3 billion. And what does that mean? That gives the Bank of Zambia even more firepower to arrest any speculative attack on the currency. Because then if the currency starts depreciating, they have that ability to intervene in the market and also reduce the level of demand in the market. The second thing is we are currently in a copper price super cycle. Projections are that by 2025, we could actually see copper prices well above 15,000 a metric ton. I know JP Morgan Chase economists are actually putting the current bull cycle to see copper prices touching an all-time high of around $25,000 a metric ton, which is a positive for the Zambian economy. And investors are looking to this as something that is likely to push Zambia's trade surplus in the positive arena, and that is going to have a positive impact on the supply of foreign exchange on the market, and that should keep the currency more stable towards an appreciating trend. for all of us, we are aware that a majority of consumer goods are actually imported into the country. A good example is if you look at what is in this room, probably less than 10% is actually produced in Zambia. So what is likely going to happen? It may not happen today or tomorrow, but it is something that may happen with a lag. An expectation is that with an appreciated currency, we are likely to see imported consumer items as well as imported inputs into our production process starting to go down. And with prices going down, that is going to benefit Zambians. For example, if you want to buy a second-hand car, that second-hand car is going to cost you $1,000. So if the kwacha was trading at 22.8, as it was previously trading, that would cost you 22,000 kwacha, $800. If you look at the kwacha appreciating to 20, what it will mean is that same car will be trading at, if it goes to 20, that car will be trading at 20,000 kwacha. So clearly, you are making a saving of about 2,800 kwacha on just the importation of one item. So those benefits are going to accrue to generally all of the consumers in the market. And what we usually tend to see is a situation where even sellers of locally produced goods, they also tend to imitate what is happening to the dollar. I've heard instances where you want to buy charcoal, and this person refers to you to say, "Sumnanvele dollar." But they're selling charcoal. Charcoal is produced in Zambia. Nothing is imported. Yeah. But what that person is doing is they are trying to make sure that the income they get from selling charcoal matches their expenses, because a shirt is an imported item. The salaula you buy is an imported item. So why should you keep selling something that is not going to gain you enough revenue for you to be able to buy those things that you can't produce? So essentially, the benefits will start trickling in after some period of time. There may be a lag.
Thank you very much for sitting down with me, Dr. Patrick Chileshe, Head of Economic Research at Zanaco Bank, of course, for sitting down with me and providing some perspective and insight into the focus of the Zambian economy. You've been watching the Zanaco 2021 Quarterly Economic Review and Outlook. The name is Winston Mavor. See you next time.